Hey YouTube, it's Robert Hall, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Fuji X-T3. But before I get into this video, I want to explain the dynamics around this situation just so you can understand why the video is structured the way it is. I was hanging out with Justin Haugen last week. You can watch his interview right up here, and randomly, out of the blue, my buddy texted me and he said, hey, do you guys want to play with the Fuji X-T3? He somehow had his X-T3 before they were supposed to be released. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but he gave us the opportunity to go shoot with them, knowing that I was a Fuji X-T2 shooter in the past and that Justin loves his Fuji X-T2. So while we had other plans, we decided to scrap them so that we could go play around with this new camera, and that's what happens in this video. Now, it's not as comprehensive as I would normally do things, but I hope you guys can take something away from my initial impressions of this camera. And also, I've got a Dropbox link in the description to raw files that you can download and check out. I don't know exactly when the raw update will be available, but you can open them, scope them, pixel peep, see what you think of the quality. There's a wide range of ISO settings, and you can analyze things like sharpness and noise, and yeah, do any of that pixel peeping that you want. Okay guys, we got a pretty unique opportunity here because my buddy out of nowhere just messaged me and he's like, want to play with the X-T3? This isn't out yet. I don't know how he got it. I'm not going to tell you who he is in case it was illegally stolen off of a Fuji truck. But the point is, we have the X-T3. I did some content on the X-T2 about a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years now. I love that camera. It wasn't quite what I needed for video purposes. There was some system issues that I thought were kind of a hindrance to my photography work, but it was the hardest camera that I ever had to sell. Like, I sold my D750 when I switched to Nikon. That was not a problem. I had no love lost despite having that camera way longer and using it for way more work. The X-T2 though, there's just something special about the Fuji cameras.
I moonlight with Fuji. What I really love about the camera system is I love the size and the form factor of it. I love the color science behind the Fuji files. I really love the straight out of camera JPEGs and the color profiles applied to them, like the classic chrome and the Acros filters. I really enjoy the camera experience. It's fun. Whenever I pick up the camera, it feels like I'm enjoying my hobby of photography and not the work of it when I'm using my DSLRs. Not to say that you couldn't use this for more robust camera work like working a wedding, because I know a lot of people do, but for me it feels like a nice departure from the DSLR rule of my work experience.
A friend of mine described who also shoots with Fuji cameras, moonlights with them if you will, and he said you feel like you're actually making the photograph. And that's true, because with all the manual dials and controls, it does slow you down a little bit and you just feel more connected with the image that you're creating. So one thing that I just find crazy is the zero blackout time. Check the back of the camera real quick. I'm in continuous and there's just no blackout time. Coming from shooting a Sony, having zero blackout time with a really high frame rate is just a different experience to be able to see what's going on the whole time. So we're gonna do a quick test to see how much of a hit rate we get with Justin walk straight towards me.
You can drink and smoke on this side? Yep.
The continuous focus doesn't feel quite as fast or as smooth as like a Sony camera would, but it is a big improvement over the X-T2. So I'm noticing that it's struggling a little bit in backlight, which is not a problem with just Fuji. That's just something that happens with PDAF sensors. It's a real weakness of mirrorless systems, that if there's heavy backlighting, then they're just not going to be able to focus that great. They're not going to have the best accuracy, but this one's struggling a little bit more than I'm used to. So still an issue on the Fuji products. But I'm in classic chrome right now, and that is by far the favorite in-camera preset that I've ever used. It just looks absolutely awesome, and I know that I don't have to do anything to these photos. I'm already done with them as soon as I got JPEGs. At least that's how I would be. I'd be confident in my exposures and not really worried about adjusting the raw files, but we can't really look at these raw files right now anyways because Adobe hasn't updated their software to handle it.
So we've encountered a weird issue here. The camera won't turn off, won't take pictures, won't allow me to change any settings. It's basically bricked right now. I can't do anything with it.
Let's try a battery pull.
I'll do a battery pull. I'm sure that'll clear it though. So it might be an initial bug on an early model, first edition version of the... There we go, cleared it. I don't know what I did to prompt that though. Just
Now kind of down the road there. Yeah. Maybe shoot down the road. See what that looks like. I'm sorry, to a road on your left. Sweet.
one thing I've noticed coming from the X-T2 and shooting with the X-T3 today is that the body feels very similar in form and the ergonomics are very similar. I do notice that the viewfinder is a little bit further from the body, so I feel like my nose isn't quite so pressed against the screen. I've also noticed that the dials and the buttons have a more tactile, clicky response, so when I roll the wheel on the camera, it feels very, the response feels more significant than on the X-T2. The buttons are more pronounced, easier to press.
And I'm already changing my first battery because this is another thing that they didn't increase or change. We're still using these same very small batteries, which just don't give you a significant amount of life, but it's not really a big deal because I put these anywhere. So we finally have a pretty big improvement in terms of video. We've got 4K 60 frames per second. Also, I really like a little detail that they did, which is the shutter speeds are designed to work off of the video. So they're designed to work with the frame rates of your video options, which is really nice. Going all the way up to 200 megabits per second in 4K in 10-bit is just a really nice bonus. It's funny because Fuji really hasn't been the go-to brand for video, but they just propelled themselves a lot closer to be a major consideration.
I'm thinking about the best way to explain this camera to people from two different perspectives. As a hobbyist shooter, as somebody who uses this camera for personal work and for fun, I don't think it's a much of an improvement over the X-T2 that would make me want to sell my camera, probably used market around $800-900, to upgrade to $1,600 to buy this camera.
Whereas a professional might really prioritize those minor benefits that you get from the increased ergonomics, like the better tactile responses on the buttons, as well as the slightly increased autofocus speed. Those are things that can be a huge difference maker for somebody looking to utilize this small system for professional work. I just did a few tests of the high ISO performance, and I'm shooting at 12,800, which is the highest native ISO. And I have the noise reduction set to 0, so I didn't want my JPEG images to be that impacted by it. And while the results are clean, like there's not a ton of noise in the image, you do lose a lot of sharpness when you're at these high ISOs.
So let's talk about the focus speed of this camera. In good light, it's great. It tracks really well and it's snappy even on the lenses that we use, which is the 56-1.2 and 35-1.4, which are not the best focus speed lenses. I don't think that Fuji is quite up to the speeds of Sony cameras, but they are improved. It is better than the X-T2, it is better than the X-H1, and Fuji's great with firmware, so it's possible that this body will get even better as time goes on. But in low light, I still wouldn't trust this camera. That was the big hang up for me with the Fuji X-T2, was once you got into a low light reception, I had to go back to manual focusing and using peaking, pre-focusing, things like that. The continuous focus just doesn't keep up in a low light situation. I'm at the same place with the X-T3. Now some might say, well, you're using the 56-1.2 or the 35-1.4. Those aren't fast focusing lenses, but that just brings up another issue that I have with Fuji equipment. And that is, no matter what you choose to buy, how much money you choose to spend, you're picking a compromise to settle with. Fuji's f2 lenses that are much more lightweight and way faster focusing and quieter, but they don't have the wide maximum aperture like their more expensive lenses do. Fuji just needs to make flagship lenses that are the fastest and the widest aperture, because those are the two primary specs that people are looking for. I understand if you want to make more lightweight alternatives that have a more narrow maximum aperture, but your widest aperture lenses shouldn't be significantly slower than those smaller models. And I'm at the same place with their camera bodies. To me, how they have the settings and features of their camera bodies makes no sense to me right now. By all accounts, the Fuji X-H1 is the flagship model. It is the beast of the APS-C lineup. But now, this X-T3 that comes out only 6 months later is better in so many situations. It has a better sensor that performs better in low light. It has more autofocus points, more autofocus detection, it's faster in autofocus. It has a better 4K frame rate, it has the 10-bit support, so a greater color bit depth. So it has all these features that are better than the XH1, most of them being video features, but then it doesn't have IBIS, no in-body image stabilization in the X-T3. To me, it just doesn't seem like a wise move by Fuji because you're forced to pick one of these cameras. So Fuji, I really think you need to bundle everything that you have to offer into one flagship model. This goes for bodies, this goes for lenses, so that people don't have to compromise. There's no reason that you can't give the supporters of your products everything they need in one package. Alright guys, those are my thoughts on the Fuji X-T3. If you want to check out sample raw files, then that is linked in the description below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment below with any questions. Until next time, keep on shooting, YouTube.